one of the figures in the film that plays strongly in your life is Ram Dass, from kind of helping inspire you in at a young age to friendship and kind of mentorship throughout, and seeing him with Jenny when you kind of came across that footage miraculously in the process of us working on this project. And it felt like it was the missing link in making the film come together, where the footage of Ram Dass with Jenny at the Taos Temple. Will you just talk a little bit about your relationship with Ram Dass? And within that, I'm also curious about any advice or words that he might have shared with you in the immediate aftermath of her loss.
Yeah, so I met Ram Dass when I was 14 and I was living on my own. It was the early 70s, so it was a different cultural space. I was living on my own at Lama Foundation, which is the place in the community in the mountains of New Mexico where Ram Dass created Be Here Now. I say created because it was co-created with the Lama community at the time. And so he would return every summer and teach. And I I spent every summer there from 14 on, and would often be his kind of community liaison and help him with setup and things, sort of practical things. And so we developed this warm connection. I called him Uncle Ram Dass till the day he died, because it felt like that. He was the same age as my parents, same cultural background, East Coast intellectual, social justice kind of Jewish family, and so that relationship was so formative for me. And when I began to teach, and I mean teach philosophy and religious studies at the college level, I noticed that I was teaching the ways that I was teaching were completely shaped by my exposure to Ram Dass and his teachings and his style of teaching, which was became more and more pronounced as time went on. I didn't mean to, to teach like my teacher, but it just kind of unfolded because that's how in me he is and he was and his voice has been. So when the footage in the film is actually, they're outtakes from Fierce Grace, the beautiful film about Ram Dass
Incredible film.
post-stroke. So soon after, within a year after his debilitating stroke, he was in a wheelchair, could barely speak. He came to Taos, to the Hanuman Temple, to the Neem Karoli Baba ashram, and Mickey Lemley, the filmmaker, wanted to shoot footage of Ram Dass there at the ashram, and he did. And there was this moment. So this was Bandara, the feast of Maharaji's Mahasamadhi, Neem Karoli Baba's leaving the body. So every year at the Taos ashram, we have a big 3 day gathering. So hundreds of people come. And one of the things that happens during that festival is that the children, the ashram children, nobody lives at the ashram except the caretakers, but the people in the community, global community, the children do a play of the Ram Lila, the story of the Ramayana of Ram and Sita and Hanuman, and Sita being abducted and Hanuman helping to rescue her. And it's a very beautiful, dramatic production with lots of sets and costumes and songs. It's beautiful. And Jenny played Hanuman that year. So that year, she was 12, I think. She was 12. And, but she was very temperamental, my Jenny. And so I don't know, like an hour, they'd been rehearsing for a week. An hour before the production was supposed to go on stage, Jenny decided that was it. She wasn't going to be Hanuman, and leaving everybody in a complete panic. So I didn't know what to do. I was her mom. They appealed to me to talk sense into her. No, she just was digging in her heels. And there was Ram Dass sitting under a tree in his wheelchair. So I went to Ram Dass and I said, Ram Dass, Jenny has decided that she will not play Hanuman. The production's about to begin. Can you do anything? And with his good left hand, he beckoned her. So we went over together and he kind of gathered her into his lap and he started whispering to her. And then in the footage that we have, the cameraman woman person wasn't there at that moment, but then must have been a minute or so later when she got out of his lap smiling, and she'd been giggling with him. She stood next to him and I was next to her and my mom was next to me. And Ramdas, to sum up whatever it was that he was privately telling Jenny, he said, you and I, remember he had a hard time talking because of the stroke. You and I, same. Hanuman, servant of Ram. Ramdas, servant of Ram. We are the same. Oh, it was such a beautiful moment. And my little girl got it because she grew up, in that environment and she understood who Hanuman was. And I think it really it did it. She got on stage and it all went beautifully. And you have footage of that too in this film.
That's so
When
beautiful.
Jenny, yeah. Do you want me to answer part two of this?
Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
When you experience trauma, as so many of you know, it's like a traumatic brain injury, grief, shattering loss has an impact on our neurobiology. So I I have lots of gaps from those early days, even the first year, I would say, after Jenny's death. But Ramdas called me, I guess a couple of days later, someone from the ashram let him know what was happening. Siddhima in India sent a message. The word went out. And Ramdas called me, and a couple of things that I remember. One was he said, because Jenny was 14, right? When she died, he said, Mirabai, you were 14 when I met you, and you first stepped onto the path. And you were like her. There was this intensity in you, and there was an intensity in her that drove her to awakening because Jenny went through this kind of before she died, there were a few days where she was in an altered state and she only wanted to be in the temple and she was mostly silent, wasn't speaking. She was in some kind of inner space that was also undoubtedly a psychotic break. And I was trying to get her help at the same time that I was trying to honor um, the other levels that were happening. But as a mother, my main concern was that she might be in danger. So I was desperately trying to line up some kind of psychiatric intervention. And Ramdas knew about this and knew about this kind of altered state that Jenny had been in because people were talking about it. And she was kind of manifesting divine mother, being this sort of beneficent goddess dispensing these invisible jewels. That was the form that her experience was taking. So Ramdas was speaking to that, and he said, at the end of her life, what was pouring through her was so intense that it shattered her vessel. She couldn't contain it. She couldn't contain it and it shattered. You were able, Mirabai, to work with it. It was intense for you and it was difficult. I also went into kind of altered states in my teens as I was new on the spiritual path. But somehow I was able to integrate these experiences. And Jenny wasn't. It was too much. But the other thing he said, which he said to Rameshwar Das too, our beloved Dharma brother who also lost a child at 14 in an accident, that this that sense that she died before her time was true and not true. So Ramdas he was not one for the spiritual bypass. He never said to me, death is an illusion, you're too attached, you need to see the big picture. Wake up, babe. No, never. He cried with me. He wept with me on the phone. He cried with me in person. when he came back to the ashram and we planted a tree for Jenny, he asked me when his godson died, how do I bear this unbearable pain, the death of a child? So he was completely there for the human experience. And he also believed that we exist on multiple levels and that Jenny had completed her karma and was ready to move on to the next adventure. I took some comfort in that, even though some of the time I was like, nah. Well, the broken open heart has room for all possibilities.
I was just remembering as you were talking, I haven't watched the movie in many years, but the beginning of Fierce Grace and the letter that he wrote to the couple who had just lost their daughter. That's such a remarkable film, and I think part of why so many people felt such resonance with him and is that he could weave worlds so well, the deeply human and the sublime and transcendent, and he could make when he would speak, you would see that they all made sense together in ways that you could maybe not always see when you're moving about your life. He could make it all so clear and simple.
It's true. So paradox ends up being the truest truth.
Yes. I remember when I got to spend about a week with him when I was filming One Track Heart. I came and stayed with him in Maui. We filmed here and there, which was an incredible experience. But then we premiered the film in Maui at the Maui Film Festival. So nobody had seen the film anywhere. And Ram Dass wanted to see it before he agreed to do a Q&A with me after the film screening, but he wanted to see it the day before. So I came to his house, and it was me and him and Ramesh Dasima watching the film in his living room. And I basically just watched Ram Dass the whole time as Ram Dass watched the film. And there was one moment I was very nervous about where Krishna Das is telling about Maharaji telling them that, yeah, LSD, it's we knew about it before. It was, they called it the yogi medicine. It's good for beginners. And then at that moment, there's a big picture of Ram Dass that zooms in on him, which I didn't want it to seem like I was insulting him, but it was, I don't know, it felt like the way that moment should play out. And I was very nervous about how he was going to respond to that, and I'm sitting right next to him. And as that moment came on, he just laughed. He's slapping his leg.
He was not one to take himself too seriously.
Not at all. No, he thought it was hilarious.